The wind howled outside as thunder rattled the fragile walls of Emily's tiny home. Rain hammered the windows, seeping through the cracks she had tried to patch with old towels. She pulled her worn sweater tighter, trying to stay warm, when a sudden knock at the door startled her. No one ever came this far out, not at this hour, not in a storm like this. Cautiously, she opened the door to find a man in his late 30s, drenched from head to toe, holding the small hand of a boy who couldn't have been more than 7. The child's lips trembled, not just from the cold, but from fear. The man spoke softly, apologetically. "We don't mean to bother you. We just need a place to stay for the night. The car broke down, and no motels nearby would take us in." Emily hesitated. She barely had enough food in the pantry, and her electricity flickered constantly. Letting strangers in could be dangerous. But then her eyes met the little boy's. He looked just like she had at that age. Lost, scared, and completely alone in the world. In that moment, something inside her softened. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. The man murmured a thank you, and the boy clutched her arm as they stepped inside. She grabbed a dry towel and handed it to them, then went to the kitchen to prepare the last 2 packets of instant noodles she had. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. Sometimes, the heart understands more than words ever could. As she handed the boy a warm mug of tea, she caught herself smiling, for the first time in weeks. In a world that had often turned cold, she had chosen warmth. And that choice would soon change her life forever. The storm still roared outside, but inside Emily's kitchen, the world felt quieter. The flickering light above cast a soft glow over the small wooden table where 3 mismatched bowls steamed with instant noodles. Emily set down the last slice of bread on a chipped plate and gave it a small push toward the boy, who looked at it like it was a feast. The man introduced himself as Daniel, his voice calm but tired. He explained that he and his son, Eli, were on the road after a sudden family emergency, though he didn't go into detail. Emily didn't pry. She just nodded and listened, sipping her tea, her eyes flickering between father and son. Eli warmed his hands around the bowl and glanced up at Emily with quiet wonder. She had draped her only blanket around his shoulders without hesitation, choosing to go without. To her, it was nothing. To him, it was everything. "You're the nicest person we've met," Eli whispered shyly. Emily looked down, her lips curving into a small, sad smile. "Kindness is free," she said softly. "I don't have much else." Daniel's eyes lingered on her, something in them shifting, as if her words had stirred something long buried. He didn't say anything, just nodded slowly, like he understood the weight behind her voice. For a while, they sat in silence, listening to the rain tapping the windows. 3 strangers bound together by circumstance, sharing a simple meal and a moment of peace in a world that rarely offered either. Emily didn't know why fate had brought them to her door, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel so alone. Neither did they. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean and glistening under the pale sunlight. Emily stood on the front porch with a chipped coffee mug in her hands, watching Daniel and Eli prepare to leave. The little boy hugged her tightly around the waist, his face pressed against her sweater. "Thank you," he murmured. Emily ruffled his damp hair, her throat tight. "Be safe, okay?" Daniel stepped forward, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. "I wish there was more time," he said, his tone sincere. "You saved us more than you know." Emily smiled softly, brushing it off. It was just a place to stay. Anyone would have done the same. "No," he said, shaking his head. "Not everyone would." They walked down the steps, Eli waving until they disappeared around the bend. Emily stepped back inside, the house suddenly too quiet. She sighed, setting her mug down on the counter, then noticed something sitting on the table, a folded piece of paper. She opened it. A neat, slanted handwriting read. Call me if you ever need anything, D.W. Below it was a phone number. Emily stared at it for a moment, puzzled. Daniel had never mentioned his last name, and the initials didn't ring any bells. She tucked the note in the back of a drawer, figuring it was just a kind gesture. People say things in moments like that, she thought. Most don't mean it. Still, for some reason, the paper felt heavier than it looked. She closed the drawer and turned back to her quiet kitchen, unaware that her simple act of kindness had set something extraordinary in motion. A week later, the sun beat down on the cracked pavement outside the diner where Emily had worked for the past 2 years. She stood behind the counter, wiping it down like she always did, when the manager approached with an awkward look on his face. "I'm sorry, Em. Business has been slow. We have to let some people go." Her heart sank. She didn't argue, there was no point. She walked home in silence, the weight of every unpaid bill pressing down on her. By the time she reached her front door, her hands were trembling. Rent was overdue, her cupboards nearly bare, and now, no job. She sank into the worn-out couch and stared at the ceiling. Then she remembered the note. Digging through the drawer, she found the folded paper and stared at the phone number. Something inside her hesitated, pride maybe, but desperation pushed her forward. She dialed. Williams Enterprises, a woman's voice answered briskly. Emily almost hung up. I was told to call this number. For Daniel? There was a brief silence on the line. Then the woman said, "Miss Emily? Mr. Williams has been expecting your call." Her eyes widened. What? We're sending a car for you. Please be ready in 30 minutes. Exactly 30 minutes later, a sleek black car pulled up outside her crumbling porch. The driver opened the door without a word. She sat inside, her heart pounding as the town disappeared behind her and glass towers came into view. When the car stopped in front of a towering skyscraper, the driver nodded. "You've arrived." Emily stepped out, eyes scanning the gold-lettered sign at the entrance. Williams Enterprises. And in that instant, the truth hit her like lightning. Daniel was Daniel Williams. Not a drifter. Not a lost father. A CEO. A millionaire. And he had come to her. Emily sat on the edge of a plush leather chair, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The office around her was nothing like her world, sunlight pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows, polished wood gleaming, quiet humming from behind frosted glass walls. It felt like a dream she didn't belong in. Then the door opened, and Daniel walked in, not soaked and exhausted like the night he showed up at her doorstep, but confident, sharp, and composed. He smiled the moment he saw her. "You came," he said gently. "I almost didn't," she admitted, standing awkwardly. "I thought, maybe it was a mistake." He motioned for her to sit. It wasn't. Daniel explained everything, how he'd taken time off, traveling in secret with his son after a brutal custody battle and corporate betrayal. He had needed space to breathe, to find something real again. "And that night," he said, "when you opened your door, you reminded me what humanity looks like. You reminded me who I want to be." Emily was speechless. He slid an envelope across the desk. "Inside, there's a job offer, at my foundation. We help women like you, strong, overlooked, deserving of more. And there's also something else." She opened it slowly, her eyes catching on the words full scholarship and nursing program. Her breath caught in her throat. "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Daniel leaned forward, his eyes kind. "Because when you had nothing, you gave everything." Tears welled up in her eyes as gratitude overwhelmed her. In that quiet, shining office, everything shifted. Her kindness, once unnoticed, had come full circle. Because sometimes, the smallest acts of compassion spark the biggest changes. And sometimes, opening your door, opens a whole new life. Conclusion. Emily's story is a powerful reminder that no act of kindness is ever wasted. In a world where she had so little, she still chose to give, without hesitation, without expectation. Her open heart, shown on a stormy night to a stranger and his son, became the key that unlocked a future she never imagined. She didn't know she was helping a millionaire CEO. She didn't care. She helped because it was the right thing to do. And in return, the universe gave back more than she ever thought possible, a new beginning, a purpose, and the chance to rise from her hardships. This story teaches us something deeply human. Compassion costs nothing, but it can be worth everything. In the quietest corners of life, miracles begin, often with a knock at the door and a heart willing to say, yes.